Good morning.
Good morning.
It's a blessing to be here. It's a great opportunity we have to worship God. We're so blessed to live in a nation like this where we have an opportunity to come together, to not have to be afraid, to not have to worry about someone coming and distracting us, disrupting us. It really is a blessing in disguise, and sometimes we take that for granted. We should be so blessed to be here, to have this opportunity. I know I feel extremely blessed this morning. It's a beautiful day outside. It's getting a little cold towards my favorite time of the year. And we're doing a series that I'm very excited about. We've been looking at a series looking at our brokenness. Now you may wonder, how in the world would that get you excited, just to examine how broken man is and how we're so fallible. Well, we've been looking at this series on brokenness to see how we can deal with the different things that haunt us. With this Halloween-themed series, we've looked at different aspects of man that are fallible, that have problems. We've been trying to see how to overcome them, to no longer be haunted by these different things. This morning, we're going to be looking at being haunted by hurts, by pain. If you want to go ahead and be turning over, Psalm 30 and verse 5 is going to be our text for this morning's lesson. And while you're turning over there, I want us to get our minds prepared a little bit for this morning's lesson. I have a question for you. Have you ever felt deeply hurt, deeply pained, sad, perhaps with so much sorrow that it just brought you to tears and you didn't know how to cope? Have you ever had a broken heart, didn't know why you should go on? Seems like any time you try to start over and you start getting a grasp on things, you find yourself right at the beginning. Anytime you find the key to happiness, someone changes the lock. Maybe you feel as though there's nothing you can do. I saw this quote and I thought it was great. Sometimes we never realize how deep our hurts go, or how deeply we can hurt someone else. In this morning's lesson, I want us to look past what we tell people, that we're fine. Perhaps the biggest lie, the most common lie we tell. When underneath we're hurt, we're broken, we're crushed, we're scared, we're fearful. We have all these problems, but we just cover it up by smiling and saying we're fine. By giving these other people a false persona that we don't really mean at all. The world has a lot of things to say about when you're hurt. How to deal with that hurt. That we can't really forgive someone when it hurts so much. That sometimes people can hurt you so bad there's no way to keep going on after that and forgive them. Maybe the world tells us that you can't keep hurting a person, expect them to keep loving you. That this person can't seem to expect me to still feel the same way about them when they hurt me so much. That I can't forgive them. That they can't ever forgive me. This morning I want us to see that Jesus is the ultimate answer to hurting. That that's what Jesus does. That's His goal. And if we're going to be Christians, which literally means to be Christ-like, we ourselves have to be looking for those that we can help heal. We have to ourselves be open to being the Good Samaritan, watching out for those that are weak, watching out for those that are hurting. This morning when we're talking about being haunted by hurts, I want us to find a way that we can use this in our life. Psalm chapter 30, verse 5 says, "For His anger is but for a moment, and His favor is for a lifetime. Weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes with the morning." It's somewhat of an uplifting part of this psalm. Now, if we were to look at the context here, in Psalm chapter 30, verse 5, we might not understand what this has to do at all with hurting. Because the context of this psalm is something that David has written at the dedication of the temple. The rest of the psalm reads, "I will extol you, O Lord, for you have drawn me up and have not let my foes rejoice over me. O Lord my God, I cried to you for help, and you have healed me. O Lord, you have brought up my soul from Sheol. You restored me to life among those who go down to the pit. Sing praises to the Lord, O you saints, and give thanks to his holy name. And then comes our verse. For his anger is but a moment, and his favor is for a lifetime. Weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes in the morning. God's favor can be found even when you're weeping. God's favor can be found even in the saddest of times, no matter how hard you're hurting. This morning, I want us to first look at this from the perspective of the one that is hurting, the one that's in pain. Maybe that's you. Second, I want us to look at this from the perspective of the person who's the hurter. We've all at one time or another, whether intentionally or unintentionally, hurt someone. Maybe we're the type of person that's hurting someone right now and we don't know how to make amends for that. Well, I want us to look at that perspective as well. And lastly, finally, I want us to finish out this morning looking at how to heal. Specifically, what kind of healing can really be long-lasting and is healthy for us. But first, those that are hurting. And perhaps this is the one we will most readily be able to relate to because pain is so common. There's no doubt something in your life, something that's springing to the front of your mind. Maybe it's happened recently. Maybe it happened a long time ago. Maybe it's something that's going on in your life right now. There's undoubtedly something in your life, someone in your life, that has caused you great pain. Maybe you're not angry. Maybe you're not bitter. Maybe you're really just hurting inside and you can't seem to heal. The first and best advice I can give you is to pray about it. Now that may seem like a simple answer. It may even seem like a shallow answer. And that might identify the real problem. Turn over with me to James chapter 5 and verse 13. The book of James is a great book to find a lot of practical application for the Christian's life. He tells us how to live by faith, what that looks like. And if you'll notice, at the end of every chapter in James, we'll find a little bit of wisdom, maybe even if it's just that one verse, that's very powerful, but it can also be very dangerous. And it's followed up on the beginning of every chapter with a new charge to help us overcome, to help us attain that higher level where we ought to be. In James chapter 5, he talks a little bit about prayer, a little bit about singing. He focuses quite a lot on prayer. Verse 13 says, "Is anyone among you suffering?" The answer is yes. Is there someone in this room right now who's suffering? Yes, at least one. Probably all of us. Is anyone among you suffering? Let him pray. Our first response when we're hurting is often to just keep it inside. Maybe to take it to a friend. Maybe we'll take it to our parents, a co-worker, a brother, a sister. Maybe we have a child that we're very close to and we can confide in them. We don't often think to take it to God, the one that can actually do something about our problems. Our all-powerful Creator, the one that knows us better than anyone else, that knows even the things we don't tell anyone else, who knows every aspect of the problem. The amazing thing about Jesus when he was walking this earth is he knew the heart of every individual. Someone walked up to him and said something, and he knew why they said it. He knew if they meant it with ill intent. He knew if they were just trying to test him, trap him. And he knew when they were sincere. No matter what problem you're having in your life, God knows every angle of it. He knows exactly how you feel. He knows exactly how everyone else in the party feels as well. Take your problems to Him. And sometimes it will stop right there. I found sometimes a lot of my problems can be solved just by reflecting on them in prayer. Maybe I'll see that it doesn't really hurt as bad as I thought. Maybe I'll see that the problem really was that I wasn't confiding and trusting enough in God in the first place. But I don't want to go too far into that because that's going to come up in our last point. Dealing with pain, the first thing you should do is pray about it. I'm not promising at the end of that prayer that this huge burden will be lifted and you'll no longer be hurting. But anytime you try to seek healing without that first step, you're going about it all wrong. Anytime you take God out of the picture, you're never truly going to find yourself healing. Second, after you've prayed about it, go to Him. If number one, praying, is the most common thing that is missed whenever someone's hurting, this number two is the second. People will be hurting so much inside and they won't say anything. Sometimes I've hurt someone's feelings, I had no idea. On one occasion it went 2-3 years and I had no idea that what I had said had caused this person quite a lot of pain. I didn't mean it in any ill way, but I had no idea because they didn't come to me, they didn't tell me. After you have taken some time of prayer, maybe that'll give you some time to calm down a little bit, to gather your senses. Prayer is a very good way to do that. You have to go to Him. But don't just take my word for it. Look over in Matthew chapter 18. Matthew chapter 18. Here in Matthew chapter 18, Jesus doesn't give a suggestion. He doesn't say this is something you should do if you feel like it, if you decide you want to do this. It's a command. He tells us exactly what we need to do. If you're hurting, if someone has wronged you, if someone has hurt you, Matthew chapter 18 verse 15 says, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault. That's powerful. Number one, he may not know his fault. The first problem that we have is we assume quite a bit. We may assume that they knew exactly what they did. They knew exactly how I would take that. We don't know that. We have no idea what's going on inside the mind of another person. Someone gave me some advice, and it was particularly with teaching. They were a teacher. And when they heard I was going to try to go into preaching, they said, let me give you some advice from my years of experience in teaching at school. Never underestimate the ignorance of your audience. Makes a lot of sense. No matter what grade level you're teaching, no matter what age group, no matter what background of the people, never underestimate the ignorance of your audience. Now this individual didn't mean that hurtfully. But when you assume someone knows something, or when you assume someone's on the same page, you can leave them behind. You can miss an important building block that can cause them to not understand at all what's going on. I found that 80% of problems are caused from people not knowing what they did wrong. People not being approached about it. From the other side of this, what if I decide not to say anything? To just keep it inside? I'm doing them a disservice. If someone has hurt me and I don't go to them and tell them about it, I'm not giving them the opportunity to clear things up. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding. Maybe there was no ill will intended. Doesn't matter. Maybe they did it maliciously and wanted to hurt me. That doesn't matter either. I have the obligation to go to them and to talk to them about it. But it doesn't stop there. It's not just going to them, going into the room and expecting to hear, I'm sorry, and if they don't say it, get mad, get upset. The obligation of the person who was hurt is to go to them, tell them their fault between you and him alone. The first step is to go to them individually. Sometimes our problem is before we go to the person, we'll tell 2 or 3 different people about them and try to get them all on our side, and then we'll go and talk to them about it. That is wrong. No matter how right it feels inside, No matter how many other people tell you it's wrong, Jesus here said, if you have a fault with someone, you go to them alone. Because then if that problem is solved, what happens? Go to him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. If they've wronged you and they've listened to you and they hear what you have to say, then you know what? I did. I'm sorry. And you've gained your brother, and it's not gone outside of a small circle of people involved. It's no one else's business. We all make mistakes. We all have times where we mess up, either in what we say or what we do. It's going to happen if it hasn't happened yet. So you go to them, you tell them their fault. If they listen, you gain brother. But what if they don't listen? But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. Notice the purpose. The purpose isn't so 2 or 3 people can gang up on them. And everyone says, you really need to apologize. That's not the purpose at all. The purpose of those 2 or other 3 people is not for them to give their judgment on things, but for them to be a witness. So they'll see, yes, you did go to them. And yes, they're not willing to try to make this right. Remember, their job here is not to pass any kind of judgment. It's to be a witness. And after they have seen what has taken place, if they're still not listening, if he refuses to listen to them, if he refuses, even when these other people are here and witnessing what's going on and saying, there seems to be wrong here, don't need to try to make it right. They will not listen then. Tell it to the church. You're supposed to go through church in order to find this problem solved. And as a family, if there still cannot be anything solved, then it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because at that point, they're to be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. I've found that 9 times out of 10, when this process is followed, you usually don't find that end result. Because usually, loving Christian family members, brothers and sisters, don't have ill will intended. And if they do, when they realize what they've done, they're usually apologetic and sorry. After all, when you're showing Christ-like love in your life, when you're trying to be like God, it's really hard to do that and have ill will intended. So after you've done this, you went all the way. Hopefully by this time, the problem's been solved. But if it hasn't, they're to you like a Gentile and a tax collector. And Jesus gives them some assurance. Truly I say to you that whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. What he's saying is that there's compliance on both sides. That you have God behind you. If you follow this pattern, you're not out there on a limb yourself. If you've done what you need to do, if you fulfilled your end of what your responsibility is as the one who's hurt, then God's behind you. Again, I say to you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything they ask, it will be done for them by the Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am among them. Now, this is not specifically talking about when 2 or 3 people are in the woodshed, that the church is there and Jesus is with them. Well, I do believe that with all my heart, and it is true, and it's taught elsewhere in the Bible. What he's talking about here is when 2 or 3 people, they're in the Lord's church, that have done what they're supposed to do, and they're in agreement on something here, that the Father's behind them. And this isn't any credence that, well, if me and this other individual believe it, then God believes it too. He's saying, if you do what I've told you to do, then you have my seal of approval. If you've tried everything, then you're not alone in making them like a Gentile and tax collector, because someone who has that kind of heart has alienated themselves from God. It's not you doing it, it's them. The question that has to be asked to each and every one of us is, when we're hurting, do we really want to be healed? Now that may sound like a very mean thing to ask when someone's hurting, but often that's the question that needs to be asked. Are we really wanting to heal? Because sometimes we don't. Sometimes we like hurting. In fact, some people even have this complex where when they're the victim, that's when they're happiest. I'm not trying to say another person is any worse for having this. I'm just making an observation from Scripture. We have to want to heal to be able to heal. Now let's take for a moment that this individual is hurting, that they have done what they needed to do, that they have went through every step and they're still in pain, and the other individual is still not allowing anything to happen. What's next? When you truly want to heal, Paul said in Romans, of God, the vengeance is mine, I will repay. It's not my job to be the judge, jury, and executioner. Jesus is going to judge the world by the authority of the Father. He's going to know every idle thing that was done. Nothing's going to be hidden from him. He'll know it all. He's the righteous judge. And at that point, I'm supposed to leave it up to him. Knowing that I myself am someone that's forgiven. Not everyone at this moment might be the hurting. Sometimes, as we said before, you find yourself on the other side. You've hurt someone. Maybe it was something you did beforehand and now you've changed. You're not like that anymore. Maybe it was something that you did in ignorance. You didn't realize you hurt them, but now you need to make it right. Whatever the case may be, whether you're in the shoes of Saul of Tarsus who persecuted the church, or you're in the shoes of someone who didn't mean to but accidentally hurt someone, seeking forgiveness can be one of the hardest things in the world. Because a person that is hurt is not always easy to deal with. A person that is hurt, that feels vulnerable, the first thought that enters our mind is to close up and not let anyone in, especially not the one who hurt us. If you're seeking forgiveness, make it something that's immediate. Because forgiveness is much easier to attain now than 10, 20, 30 years down the road. By that time, things have festered up, calloused over, and real problems can begin. It's something that's supposed to be done immediately. In Matthew chapter 5, and verse 23, Jesus is dealing with someone who has come to present their offering. And they realize that someone has something against them. That they have some claim that they could lay to them of some wrong they had done. He says you can't go on acting like it didn't happen. You can't pretend that, well, that didn't happen. That maybe even no one else knows about it. Well, that doesn't matter. When you come before God, having something against someone having something against you that you're not dealing with, you're not doing what Jesus approved of. You're not treating this the way God wanted you to treat it. Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 23, says, so if you are offering your gift at the altar, and even there, even while you're there offering that gift, you remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there. Go immediately. Leave your gift at the altar and go first to be reconciled to your brother. Then you can come back and offer your gift. It's something so important that if you're preparing to worship, your gift's right there at the altar, and you realize, my brother has something against me, my sister has something against me, it needs to be something you settle as immediately as that. How can you come before God? Opening up your heart to Him, knowing that you've wronged someone. Maybe you're not in that situation. Maybe you realize you've done something wrong. You've tried your best to make amends for it. You've asked for their forgiveness. You've changed. But they still won't grant it. It's going to happen. You will undoubtedly meet somebody that won't forgive you for something you've done wrong. Maybe you didn't even do it to them. Maybe it's something you did previously in your life and they can't look over it. You can't change people. You can't force someone to do what's right. Even if you've left your gift at the altar, you went immediately and tried to fix things, and they aren't having it. God is the one we ultimately have to give an answer to. You don't have to give an answer to that individual you wronged. You have to give an answer to God. when you've asked for forgiveness, when you've done everything you can do, you have to move on. We have to find peace ourselves. Psalm 103 and verse 12 can give us some comfort. I can only imagine being Saul, having persecuted the church, having done so much wrong, having physically killed people. Many of us say, well, I've done some bad things. I've never killed anyone. Well, Saul killed someone. It's not any degree worse. It's sin, sin, sin. But maybe you think you've done something so horrible and you just can't let yourself forgive it. In Psalm 103, verse 12, this is how God, through the psalmist, through David, has described where our sins are after we've been forgiven. Psalm 103, verse 12 says, as far as the east is from the west, so far does He remove our transgression from us. As far as the east is from the west, we're clean. It's been separated. It's been forgotten. God doesn't even want to remember it anymore. Jeremiah 31:31 says there's going to come a day where He's going to forgive you. Your sins are not even going to be remembered by Him. He won't bring them up against you again. Once you're forgiven, you're forgiven. The only thing that's left is forgive yourself. And that can only come from realizing that you're clean. There's nothing you can do to atone for the wrong that you've done. If there could, then we wouldn't have needed Jesus. It's insulting to the sacrifice that He made for us to continue to hurt ourselves. It's as if His sacrifice had no effect. As if the sacrifice that He made couldn't really clean us, but it has. You see, it's only in Jesus that the true healing can be found. When David had committed an atrocious sin, he had lied, deceived, committed adultery, he'd killed. He'd done something very shameful, and as the king of the nation, when everyone should have been looking up to him for an example, he gave a horrible one. When he realized his fault, his claim was, I sinned against God. Because ultimately, that's who he would have to give account to. The healing can only come from God. It's important for us to go through the process of trying to make amends with our brother, with our sister, with the people out in the world that be wrong. It's important. That's an important part of the process. But it ultimately relies on God. Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 and 29. If you think that Jesus doesn't want someone as broken as you, you're wrong. You could not be more wrong. If you think that my burdens are just too heavy, God doesn't want a sinner like me. He doesn't want someone that's messed up as bad as I have. In Matthew chapter 11, I'll begin in verse 25. At that time Jesus declared, I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that you have hidden these things from the wise and the understanding and revealed them to these little children. Yes, Father, for such was your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son. Anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal it. Now notice the invitation He gives. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, my burden is light. If that isn't an invitation to the hurting, I don't know what it is. If that isn't an invitation to someone whose soul is burdened with the wrong they have done, with the wrong that has been done to them, I don't know what is. His yoke is easy, His burden is light. Come to Him. Healthy healing starts with Jesus. With coming to the one that wants to comfort you. With seeking the one who can help heal. Isaiah chapter 53, verses 4 and 5 deals with how our healing truly comes. What's what's done on this earth is done. There's no recompense you can do. There's no amount of money you could give away, no matter good deeds that you could do to atone for the wrong that you've done. Once it's done, it's done. It's struck against you on the record. But by His stripes, you can be healed. By the sacrifice that He made, you can find forgiveness and salvation. By the death He died and the life He now lives, you can be healed. Are you looking to Jesus to find that healing? Are you looking to the right source? The question I want to leave you with this morning is if you are ready for the pain to stop, if you're ready to be forgiven, if you're ready to forgive, you want to end the burden, come to Jesus. Come right now. All together we stand and sing.